And once again, we are here on Living in the 21st Century. Joining me is State Representative Russell Holmes from the 6th South District. And Mr. Holmes, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Great to be here.
On Living in the 21st Century.
Thank you for asking me to come.
It's a pleasure. I first want to start out by quoting from this piece of article that I got from the State House News Services.
Okay.
And it states, straight up racist, Massachusetts Democrats raise concerns with party leadership.
Sure.
Now, this is a little bit messy to some degree. What really going on among these new representatives that are in the Democrats who would have won their office back here recently in 2018?
Sure. I think that comment was made in an interview with Nika Elangadro, if I recall. That's Nika and Rachel and I think Liz Miranda were all on another program discussing just really their race. And I think also Framingham Mayor Spicer was also in that conversation. But the challenge that we have, and it still is a challenge that I have, and that is that many times in the Democratic Party, the districts that people of color in particular are going to typically be elected in don't get very much in resources. Because what happens is if you are in the party or if you're in the leadership, many of the seats that people of color are winning in are seats that you know is going to deliver a Democrat.
Yes.
So if you just kind of think about the mechanics of how politics are going to work, there are 160 House seats, and of those 160 House seats, here in the Commonwealth, there may be 15 or 20 very competitive seats. But those seats are not going to be competitive here in Boston or in some of these Democratic enclaves. And so as a consequence, when the new representatives were having that conversation, they were talking about what we get for resources, what we're going to get for talent, and we're going to get for advice from the party and from leadership, and there's going to be very little of that. And just the way it works today is they don't get very much of that is because why would you get into a very competitive race amongst Democrats when you would much rather be putting your resources and your time and your efforts in races that are going to be more competitive between Democrats and Republicans. I just feel very different from that, though. I feel that what the party and what leadership should be focused on are our districts, because of the fact that we're the districts that are going to be the ones that are going to perform the best for you. So like when you think about just my ward and my precinct, I live in Ward 1414, one of the strong Democratic enclaves here in Boston, but across the Commonwealth. Even when we were unhappy with some of the things that Hillary said and some of the things that Bill had done over decades when it comes to criminal justice and the like, we still in the recent election with Trump and Hillary, unhappy voters still voted 96% for the Democrat, for Hillary, and 2% for Trump. And so if that is the case, what you would want to, I would think, want to be motivated about is getting more of my vote out, because when 96% of the folks in my district are going to still vote Democrat, that's the place that you would want to run up the vote. But just, I'm not in the habit of calling persons a person a racist, unless they show it to me. And however, I think that it feels racist to all of us when you ignore us, but then ride our backs essentially to the finish line and depend on our vote, but then get to a position where it's time to name leadership in the party or leadership at the House and the Senate, and you don't include us in those conversations.
Okay. So then you can actually say that there is some form of negligence when it comes to some districts throughout the party.
Yes, of course. That's exactly how I would put it. But I would also put it that we are going to still have to have a voice, even beyond just on the days of election. We should be in your leadership team. When you're deciding leadership team for the party, and when you're deciding your leadership team for when it comes to all of the committees and chairs and things of that nature as well.
Do you think the constituents of those districts are fully aware of the negligence? And if so, is there any way that they can be more educated to what's going on within their environment?
Well, I represent one of those districts, as you refer to. I
Right.
have the district that has the most amount of blacks in it. So about 7 out of 10 folks in my district are black, and then about 22% are Latino and Asian. So of the folks in my district, 92 thereabout percent of it is of color. And certainly we see the lack of resources or negligence, as you put it,
Right.
in what we're going to get around housing, what we're getting around public safety, what we're getting around transportation, and primarily we see it most, for me, from my
Right.
perspective, in education. We still are going to continue to demand that our schools perform much better than what they've been performing, and a lot of that is really around resources. Give you an example. We think about the orange line here in Boston that has moved along the Jamaica Plains side
Right.
of town much more than the Roxbury side going through Dudley. You think about what that did 30 some odd years ago from a resources perspective. You took a train out of Dudley
Yes.
and you moved it not very far, it feels like, but it's far enough where all of a sudden now you've left the neighborhood with one of the main resources you would like, which is a train, and left it with just buses. My advocacy still says that we've need to bring back some type of heavy rail transit or something of that nature back to that neighborhood.
Definitely. It's really sad in this time of season that with so much educated black folks than it was in comparison many years ago,
Sure.
they're still not getting their fair share of what they deserve to get, and still at the end of, I would say, the master's tables that's feeding from the crumbs. And I think the time would have come that I think minorities in this country should really be able to command a fair share of substance that this country produces at all levels of
Sure.
society.
Sure, I was just with Nika and with Liz. We were at a prison just before I came here.
Yes.
And that's exactly the conversation we were having around criminal justice reform.
Yes.
That was exactly the conversation we were having around whether or not even inmates should be allowed to vote again in the future, because of the fact that until you get in our leadership team, whether it be here and locally and nationally, a more representative body of leadership of what this country looks like, you don't get all the perspectives. And when you have just a narrow perspective, you're only really serving a narrow set of people. And so to your point about crumbs, yes, I think that more than ever, the Democratic Party itself should understand that our voices should be loud and clear.
Yes.
You know, and so when it comes to the question around calling someone a racist, I still go back to even today when we're thinking about Northam, the governor from Virginia.
Yes.
No, I would never call him a racist. You look at everything that he had done all the way into now, and actually the way he advocated during the Charlottesville incident showed that no, he would never have that message of being called a racist. But then today you now see, yes, he is. And so that's why I meant by I don't call someone a racist until you show me you're
Exactly.
racist. So if you're going to put on blackface and stand next to a Ku Klux Klan
Yes.
person, and then the next day said you don't even know if that's you, but you know you may have put on blackface and you can't recall, all of that to me is a summation, whether or not you're a Republican or a Democrat, that you are not in a role that you should be
Exactly.
in as a leader.
Exactly.
And so that's what we should be demanding of our leaders,
Of
even
course.
if that's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 30 years ago. I think he knew this was part of his history. At a minimum, he should have had the courage and the foresight to understand that someone was going to dig this up one day, and he should at least make that known to us as the voters were going out and voting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to turn our attention a little bit to the national level.
Sure.
And for the past 2 years, Donald Trump would have stated for a fact, and it was concluded that he would have told more than 8,000 lies.
Oh, sure, sure.
I mean, that's a lot of lies, right?
Yes.
And the reality in totality, if you look at all the presidents combined together, even vice presidents,
Sure,
it's still nothing in comparison.
sure.
With that kind of leadership of lies and bigotry and hate and a divided nation, what does that really leave for this future generation? I mean, you got kids growing up today stating, well, hey, well, if the president can tell lies, I can tell them too.
Sure.
Someone that they look up to and idolize, but by nature, they're not mature enough to understand what this man really is. What kind of society you foresee having leadership like this will do to our future generation.
Well, I think it actually has a positive impact, believe it or not, because one of the things that I have learned is that many people are much more engaged. And so even if you look at last week, you had D&I Coates, you had the FBI Director Ray, and you had Gina Haspel all come out and say nothing but the truth on the oath, right? And so what I think the president does in all of his lies and all of his acts is he helps to highlight really what is evil and what is bad. And he makes you have to make a decision. What side of this conversation am I going to be on?
Right.
And I can tell you wherever I go now, folks are more engaged politically. Like for a long time, people didn't think it didn't matter if you voted. It didn't matter if you were part of the conversation.
Correct.
Now all of a sudden people know when hearings are happening, they know the bills that are being passed, they're conversational about just whether it be city, state, and federal. So we just passed a civil, an act to try to get more civil knowledge into our cities and into our schools and have it so that folks understand bills and things of that nature. And when you think about it, Trump has been the best educator for me around civil engagement and what we should be doing because of the fact that at every age, someone is talking to me about politics, whether it be even in my workplace, at the State House, at church, folks are engaged. And so I think his 8,000 lies, I think and running, I think it's the Washington Post who tracks them, 8,000 lies and running, it starts to show that it does matter who's president, it does matter with the decisions we make, and I think people are going to be more engaged, not less. I could be wrong, but I think it leads to folks being more active.
Okay. We want to look at the open mind of how Trump really thinks.
You can figure that out? Oh, okay.
Well, here's the reality. This week, we had some of his chiefs came up and they said clearly that North Korea is still pursuing their nuclear arms and so forth, and obviously they are tailored to hit the United States of America. Trump, on the other hand, said, no, it's not so.
He's our friend.
He's our friend. Everything's good, nice and dandy. Okay. He pulled out the military from out of Afghanistan. And his chief of security is stating that the ISIS group is now coming back together. They're becoming strong. And I can't figure out for 1 second, if these people are allowed to come back strong. Now remember what Trump said, no man, we beat ISIS up and we beat them up badly. We beat them badly.
They're done.
Right? They're done, they're finished. So it's time for our men come back home, our armed forces come back home. Now, could he not see for a second, no, he may be living in denial, I don't know.
I think he lives in a total different reality. I don't even think it's denial.
Right, because here's the situation. These guys could come back together and plan to hit the United States just like they did on 9/11. And when it comes to the protection and security, here we're worrying about a border wall. But 9/11 had nothing to do with a border wall. It was planned internally and it was executed internally. And that day, thousands of people lose their lives.
3,000 lives,
I don't know, but could the American people see right through this guy and come 2020 change government? Now, there's some of his people who are going to run against him.
We don't know that.
Well, we don't know that.
But we can't have it. I think it would be very bad to have an independent run and pull potential votes from Democrats. So truly, I'm not a big fan of that idea. But I also believe that Trump is going to have a base, and the question becomes, of all the folks around the country in the middle, how do they respond? Because also, as I mentioned, there are going to be some folks in our party who are not going to move towards Trump at all. And so I'm hoping that truth wins the day, and if truth wins the day, I think we as a country, when I think inherently about just Trump in general, I think he is truly a symptom and a result of Obama. I think there are just an awful lot of people in the middle of the country that were mad about the fact that we've elected the first black president. I really do believe that's part of this. And so when you contrast not only Obama, but Clinton, even in all his ilk and his ills, to just tell them the truth.
Right.
I think we want to be a country that is based in truth, and I think we're going to come back to our senses as a country. I really do believe that, and going to elect, even if it's Romney running against
Yes.
Our current president and winning. I think in all cases,
Yes.
we're going to make a better decision.
Well, but of course, I think anyone, with the exception of him, would be a better decision.
But he's also lazy,
Well,
right?
he is.
So not only is he, from my perspective, obviously, but not only is he in his own world, as I said, he doesn't get up early. He doesn't stay there late. He's happy to be in Mar-a-Lago again. I'm sure that's probably really the reason why he went on and brought government back together, because of the fact that he wanted to go back on vacation instead of missing his Christmas vacation. But I believe he doesn't put the attention to detail that is needed to run this country, and he doesn't care about others. That's what I see in all the things that I see as a politician. I know the sacrifices that I make at a small level as a state rep, and thinking I wouldn't put people in front of me, not if this is the choice and the job that I've chose to have, and I certainly wouldn't do that with the president as president. And he, from my perspective, from where I sit, puts himself above the people, and people know that, and they recognize it, and I think that's why he won't be reelected.
The other thing, how bad do you think the security of this country is being compromised?
Sure.
Now, Trump had meetings with Putin several occasions.
Sure.
And they were all held behind closed doors. No one was there to take any transcript, nothing like that of these meetings. And it is no doubt, everyone knows that this guy is a suck-up to Putin. And it seems to me that he loves those who are in dictatorial positions.
Sure, of course.
And he worships these guys.
Yeah.
And for something tells me that I believe there are secrets that shouldn't be out, that he would have probably divulged to Putin, and no one knows about it. And for the mere fact that he kissed up to so many dictators, including Putin, and back there in North Korea, I just have a strange feeling that the American security is at high risk.
Yeah.
And unless there's strong investigations, and I don't know how much they may get out of that,
Sure.
since they have no evidence of what was said or spoken of, when it concerns this nation. I don't think it was for his own personal edification that he spoke to Putin privately, even though there are some Republicans say that Trump is a person who like to have meetings in confidence and no one around him. But this is not his personal life anymore. This is not his personal business. This is a nation. And not just a nation, but it's a nation that's standing against one of its adversaries. And when this kind of thing happened, and not only that, he is also condemning his chiefs of intelligence who can tell you what's going on. He's not believing them. He's stating that they should go back to school. So from your standpoint, what do you think when it comes to the security of this country? Do you think it is being at a point where America becomes so weak?
Well, I think as a country, we're not weak. I think we saw last week with the intelligence team that we're still very strong. But I think everything he does that I've seen here publicly compromises us in some way or another. Like you said, whether it be North Korea, whether it be what's happening with Russia, whether it be what's happening in Syria. I think just for decades, we're going to have to put back some pieces. We're going to put some pieces back together around, even that's the relationship with the dictators. What about the how we're tearing down relationships with British, with the Canadians, what's happening with our relationship with Mexico. So I think we're going to literally have to build things up that he's torn down. But some of it is some ideas that Republicans have wanted to implement for quite some time. And so we will now see what's the result from their ideas. Here's what I mean. Obama had 2 years where he has the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And in those 2 years, you really get to see a person's values when you can run the gamut. And what did the Democrats decide to choose to pass? health care. So you know that was there. If
Yes.
you're going to put everything all on black, all on this one issue, they put it all on health care. Well, Republicans have their opportunities. Certainly not as large of a majority as Obama did, but what was the one thing that they wanted to ram through? And that was a tax cut for the rich.
Yes.
And so we understand your values now. We understand when you're leading and you're in control, you want to give money to the rich and starve, essentially, the beast, as they call it. So you bring down taxes so that you can bring down everything else, so that you don't have enough money. You can come back and say, we can't fund Social Security the way it's been funded. You can't fund Medicare the way it's been funded. You can't fund all these other social services. That's really the idea that they have, that we're giving too much to our people.
Yes.
And or with the Democrats, you can say, we now want to help people. And I think that's why I'm confident that you can't have a more stark perspective.
Yes.
Do I agree with everything in the Democratic Party? No. Do I agree with everything in the Republican Party? Clearly not. I'm not a member of that party. But when you have those two stark perspectives and you can contrast them against each other, and I think it goes back to what Ronald Reagan said: Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? That question is going to still still need to be asked next year. And even though you've seen an economy with a very low historical unemployment rate, you still see many people of need, and you see the gap growing between the rich and the poor growing wider. And most of us live in the middle. Certainly very few of us are rich, but then you have the rest of the country, and for us, life isn't getting so much better. And so that is the backdrop that our president is going to have to run against next year. I think it's going to be a poor one for him.
When is like 7 years old, that's like 47 years ago. That's a long time.
Sure.
They had this old Jehovah Witness lady. She used to come to my home on Saturdays.
Sure.
And she would normally teach me Bible scriptures and so forth. They had a magazine called the Old Watchtower magazine.
Old Watchtower. I know Watchtower.
Right.
Yes.
And I can remember vividly, she had showed me these two twin towers. And it looked just like the World Trade buildings come crumbling down and people running in the streets for horror.
Wow.
But more than that, she said to me on several occasions that Russia will befriend United States of America and successfully disarm America. And I don't know if this is what she was saying.
Sure.
Right? And they will come up in that superpower again. Now, at that age, I was only like 7 then. I never really understood clearly.
Sure.
But I find it repetitively all the time. She always used to tell me this. And it's only now after 9/11 that I recognize where the Watchtower magazine depicts that. And now I see Trump and Putin so close, I'm beginning to wonder,
is she a prophet?
If she's a prophet.
Yeah.
Right? Because it seems to me, and Putin's a very smart man. He's a very intelligent guy.
Sure, of course.
He was head of the
And he's
KGB,
very rich, too.
And he's very rich, right?
Yes.
And I believe for a second that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes when it comes to Putin and Trump that this nation don't know about. And this is something that need to be seriously investigated, or else this nation could be in trouble sometime down the road.
Sure.
I don't know. Putting Trump in again, and I hope to God that there ain't no really racism going on in the Democrat Party. And the reason why, if this happened among the minority group that we have elected or looking to run in the next presidential election,
Sure.
Trump is he's going to devour that.
Yes.
He's going to put them.
He's going to eat us alive. And that's why I was saying to you about Northam and from Virginia.
Yes.
He needs to leave immediately. It can't be, you think about the representative from Iowa and his horrible comments he's made, Representative King, for years, and now he's been stripped of his committees. But stripping him of his committee is nothing compared to a governor of a state.
Exactly.
The executive branch, the entire branch of government is under your watch.
Yes.
You need to leave, and you need to leave today.
Yes.
And so we as a party, Democrat and Republicans, need to understand that that needs to happen. And so I agree with you. Trump would use that against the Democratic Party.
Right.
But I think more than that, Trump is going to have to continue to advocate for the whole country, which he has not done at all. So he still is going to have to make a decision at some point. Is he going to focus on just his narrow base, or is he going to try to manage the entire country? I think the thing that's the flaw in his strategy is that there's an entire country out here that he's ignoring or running against and doing things against. And I think that's going to come back. And that's why I know we're wrapping up on time here soon, but that's why I never, ever want him impeached.
Correct.
I don't want him impeached. The reason I don't want him impeached is because I don't want him to ever be like a martyr to anyone.
Right.
I want him to get back in the race, and I want him to actually lose. I want him to have to put his values against the values of someone who's running against him, and then understand that the country either sent you home. That's what we did. We decided to send you home. And because I think we have certainly enough around him to box him in with Pelosi and the rest of the Democrats in the House. Just like with Obama. Obama had 2 years that he kind of ran the things the way he would like, and then he was boxed in for his other 6 years. Certainly, he will still get all of his judges in. He'll get those things in, which will have an enormous impact, obviously, on the rest of our lives. But I just think with the understaffing he has done throughout every single agency all across government, we will be able to come back in and build back up what he's been tearing down, because we can build it up much faster than he's been tearing it down because of the fact that he hasn't even filled his positions, all of his positions.
Correct.
And many of his positions are even temporary, even at the highest level. At cabinets, you're having temporary
But he
people.
He probably want to run the government himself.
He does, but he's found out this is a big government to try to run.
You know, I hope. I don't know what you think. Do you think he would want to declare state of emergency?
Oh, I know that's what he's going to do. I've said to my wife, I don't see another solution for him. It does everything he wants. He gets to put a flag down and say, we won.
Yes.
But we're going to build a wall. And he gets to allow government to stay in place by signing some bill with Schumer and Nancy, as Chuck and Nancy, as he says about them. But then the person that is really running the show is obviously running the Senate, and he's going to make a decision. I love the fact that they rebuked him in the Senate this week to say you should not be coming out of Syria and Afghanistan so fast. And so that's the one thing I like about that has happened, because of the fact that Mitch McConnell, every other thing he's done, I think has helped Trump to destroy this country.
Okay. Well, Russell Holmes, it's a pleasure having you on the show. I hope that sometime we can probably, I know you're busy, come back again and we can go into some other discussions as we move towards 2020 on election and so forth. It would be an honor to have you on the show.
I'd love to come back.
Beautiful. Well, for all those who have been tuning in, I want to say thank you and enjoy your day. Bye-bye.